Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're checking out a tiny little action camera from Panasonic today. This is called their HX-A1M, and this is the black version of it. I think they have one also in orange. It's very lightweight, very small, as you can see. They actually have some additional accessories. You can kind of mount them to your head. They have one where you can mount one facing forward and another one facing backwards, so you can do some pretty cool shots with it. It's not too expensive. It's about under $200, about $170 or so on Amazon right now. It will shoot 1080p at 30 frames per second. It will do 60 frames per second at 720, so it's a little behind some of the other action cameras that I've looked at, but this is relatively inexpensive though, so I think it's going to be in line a little bit more with some of the lower end cameras out there. A couple of gripes right off the bat. It has an internal battery that will only record for about a half an hour, and then when the battery dies, it charges very slowly. It takes about 3 hours to recharge the battery. You can't change the battery out on here in its default configuration. You can buy a little add-on pack that goes on the back here, so you can add an additional battery that you can use and remove. But the built-in battery is only going to give you about a half hour or so of recording time, and then it's going to take 3 hours to charge. It's got a half a milliamp charging rate, so it is very, very slow. The controls on it are pretty simple. You just power it up here just by holding down the power button. It'll beep once and you'll be ready to go. The default mode is 1080p, 30 frames per second. It is water resistant, so you can put it underwater for brief periods of time. It can only go to about 5 feet without having some other kind of enclosure on it. They do have some little gaskets that you'll be able to see here as I unscrew the backing here that will protect it from limited exposure to water, but I would not consider this an underwater camera. It's probably enough to prevent any damage from an accidental slip into water. When you do have that backing removed, you've got your USB port here for connecting it to a computer. It runs on SD cards. It gets very upset when that card is out, as you can see. I've got a 16 gigabyte card in here right now from SanDisk. It doesn't need a terribly fast card, so you can run it on some of the less expensive cards out there, and it should record just fine because the bit rates, again, are pretty limited given its limited amount of frame rate that it can handle. It does have Wi-Fi. We're going to check that out in a minute. What's interesting is the lenses. So this camera has some night vision capability, and I say some because you can get some decent night vision with it because it is actually heavily tuned into the infrared. So the filter that is used for normal daylight shooting has actually got a green hue to it, which you can see. So this actually filters out, I think, if I'm not a lighting expert here, but I believe this actually filters out infrared light during the day. When you screw it on, it detects that that lens is on and it kind of shifts modes. The other lens is for the infrared, and when you put this one is perfectly clear, so it doesn't really even look like an IR filter to me. When you put this one on, the camera will switch itself back into that night vision mode and be more sensitive to infrared light. I got a couple of shots here, as you can see, in very low light. Putting that lens on makes a little bit of a difference, but of course it adds that green hue that you see typically with night vision cameras. So it'll probably do a little bit better in the night than it might otherwise, but it's not spectacular, but you can definitely get a little bit of a better night vision out of it there. Now the camera is tripod mountable, not out of the box, but it does have a tripod mount in the box, so you can just take this little guy here, position the camera through the little loop here, and then just tighten it down, and then you can get your camera mounted up on the tripod that way, or some other mount if you wish to do that. They also have a multi-mount here with some Velcro on it. Not very long Velcro, so you're somewhat limited. It's not quite a helmet mount, but you could put some sticky stuff on the bottom of this thing and attach it to a helmet or something like that, or maybe just put it around a wrist or something, so not too bad there. The image quality is so-so on it. I'll put up a couple of sample images here, then link to some of the 60 frames per second stuff in my description below. So you can see the video quality is good, but there's no stabilization on it, so if you're doing something like dirt biking or something where you're getting a lot of bounce or a lot of vibration, it's not going to be very good for that, because the shots are going to be very, very, very unstable, especially this one here where I'm just holding the camera and walking with it. You can see every footstep is kind of reacting to it. I did kind of mount the camera to my head out my back deck a little bit, which is a little bit smoother, but again, there's no built-in stabilization on here, so any kind of sudden jerky movements or any kind of vibration as you're moving along will be translated right onto the camera here. Now, in fairness, other cameras at this price point also do not have stabilization on board either, but it's something I would really like to start seeing more of, because on the camcorder side of the world, which are of course larger cameras, I'm seeing some really awesome stabilization, and this one just doesn't have that. Now the app that you run with this through its little built-in Wi-Fi thing is very critical to its configuration. So we're going to turn on the Wi-Fi right now and see how that app works. All right, we've got the camera connected via Wi-Fi right now. As you can see, the image is pretty decent back to the phone. There is a bit of a delay between the time that things happen in reality and when they take place on the screen here. So it is a little bit laggy in its overall presentation. I found no matter which video mode you're in, it does seem to lag a little bit, even with my phone right next to the camera here. You do have some settings that you can't really set on the camera, so you have an option here to set it to a wider angle. It does take a second to process that, so we'll wait for that to catch up. It kind of switches modes. So right now we're in the wide mode, and then you can get a less wide mode by clicking back on that left button there. And again, it'll take it a second for it to switch back into that other less wide mode, the standard mode, to get things back and running there. But you can switch between your still photo mode and your video mode here. You can also set it to record right from the app as well. And this is the only place where you can actually get an indicator as to what your battery life is. So you see, if you see up in the right-hand corner there next to that 0213, you see how much battery life we have left on the cameras. Now, there are some additional menu options here in the lower right-hand corner that you can use to configure the camera. I'm not going to step through all of those features, but I'll give you an idea of a couple of things that you can do, like setting the frame rate here. So this is where you would set it to 60p for 720. And this is not to be confused with the button that they have on the front of the camera here for slow motion, which is right there. So you can hit the mode button when you're not connected via Wi-Fi, and it will record slower motion video, which is essentially doing a 60p video, but running it at 30 frames per second. So that is how it gets to slow motion. So it spits out a file already in slow motion, but my preference, and I think something you should think about doing when you're shooting video, is to do 720p 60 on here and then slow it down in whatever editing software you're using. It's just a better way to go about doing it. There's a couple other things worth noting here, including the ability to have loop recording. So if you want to use it as a dashboard camera, you can set it up in that loop mode, and what that will do is when it fills up the card, it'll go back and start over again. So you're able to, kind of use it continuously for recording. But the problem is, of course, that there's not a lot of recording time that you're going to get on battery, and the lack of stability control, like stabilization, is really bad for driving, especially when you're hitting bumps on the road. So I wouldn't recommend that. Slow motion here will do exactly what that button does on the front there. You can do other things like microphone wind reduction, turning the microphone on and off. You can also set some delay to the start and recording. So if you want to push the button and then mount the camera, you'd have a little bit of delay there, and a couple of other options too. If you want to see more of the menu, do let me know, but that was just kind of the basic overview of the overall camera functions. So that is the Panasonic HX-A1M, and I have to say I'm not really all that crazy about this camera. The video quality is so-so. You can see more video samples in that playlist that I'll link below. But I'm really disappointed that we're not seeing 1080p at 60 frames per second out of this thing, and the battery life is pretty bad too. So you're looking at, again, about a half hour or so of recording time before you've got to stop and charge the battery, which of course cannot be removed. Now you can buy the add-on screw-on battery that will add $100 to the price tag. So at that point, you might be able to get into a camera with comparable battery life and the 1080p 60 if you do go the option of getting that $100 add-on battery. Now you could also, though, plug in a standard USB external battery pack into the back of this thing as well, because it does just have a standard USB charging adapter, so that would work too. But again, that's just another step that you have to take to kind of make up for a shortfall. So, short battery life, very long charge times, unless you opt for a more expensive battery on it. But there are some things that I find interesting about it, which I think in certain use cases might be very useful. One is the weight and the form factor. It is very lightweight, very mountable, perhaps in ways that other action cameras aren't. So those are some interesting options for using this. And I also think that having a night vision mode, which this one has, could also be a very interesting use case, because other action cameras don't really have that function, at least not that I've seen from major manufacturers. Now you're going to need some kind of infrared light to get the most out of this thing. So you can get an inexpensive infrared light, kind of paint an area with that infrared light, and this will be able to pick up things in the dark that you might not be able to do on other action cameras. So that might be something of interest to people that are doing night photography or something in the evening, and they really want to get some night vision going. This might be an inexpensive way to get at that. So there are some use cases, but I think for a lot of people who are in the market for an action camera, they're going to want that 1080p 60 with a little bit longer battery life, and this will not deliver that without adding on some accessories. This is Lon.TV, and thanks for watching.